Little Shop of Horrors turns 40 this year. I can't believe it. I actually was at the opening of the original show. Adam Abraham has written this brand new book called Attack of the Monster Musical, A Cultural History of Little Shop of Horrors. Adam, you don't look old enough to have seen this show.
I did not see it in the original incarnation. I heard the audio tape. Somehow I learned about the show from the audio tape, which my mother purchased for me, and I listened to it over and over and over again. And in my mind, it lived as this album, a series of songs. And I didn't actually see it till later, but I've been a fan of the show for a long time.
What made you write the book?
It was an admiration for Howard Ashman. He was the director, lyricist, and author of Little Shop and went on to work for the Disney Company, where he helped to create The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. So I've always loved Ashman's work and want to learn more about it. And this is really the signature show that kind of launched his career and that of Alan Menken, the composer of the show.
What is the most significant thing that you learned in researching the show?
I think the most significant, the singular thing that I learned was that Howard Ashman knew exactly what he wanted and was just so focused on getting that. Even when no one thought it was a good idea to adapt this cheap, forgotten film from 1960, Howard persevered. Even when he did a reading, a presentation for fellow songwriters, and they hated it, he persevered. At any given moment, he could have said, oh, forget it, it's not going to work. This is no good. But he had a vision, a clear-eyed vision of what it should be, and managed to get it on stage and get all these other people, these talented people, to join that vision and make it happen.
You talk in the book about all the different people that were up for Aubrey. Can you talk about who they were and how Ellen Green won the role?
Howard claimed that he had her in mind when he wrote the part. She'd actually auditioned for an earlier show that he did with Alan Menken called God
Goldwater.
Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and he remembered her, but it wasn't offered to her. She wasn't quite that famous, and other people came in and read for the piece, just like you would for any off-Broadway or Broadway show, and they actually went with Faith Prince. She gave the best audition, and they wanted her, but unfortunately, Faith was not available. She was doing one of those industrials. This is a thing that actors used to do all the time. You could do 4 weeks or 2 weeks and go work for some company and do an industrial musical. And she was booked for the opening month and couldn't get out of it. She wanted to do Little Shop, as I understand, couldn't get out of it. So Ashman said, you know what, I'm going to go back to my original idea. I saw Green doing this piece. Let's try her. And she had, it seemed like a separate audition that people remembered at night, where just a handful gathered around the table, and Ellen Green sang the song Somewhere That's Green, a song written for the character of Audrey, and it must have seemed like fate, because that song sounded to Howard just the way he always wanted it to.
How did she end up getting the film over all those famous people?
It was hard. I mean, for the film, obviously, you say now this is a multi-million-dollar Warner Brothers film, the film that Frank Oz directed, and they talked about Madonna. They were interested in Cyndi Lauper. They discussed, at least mentioned, Barbra Streisand, Liza Minnelli. So there are lots of people who could have done it and would have taken the role away from Ellen. And as you know, many Broadway actors don't always get to do the film version of their musical. So it was a bit of a struggle. I mean, Howard definitely fought for her, and she had to essentially audition for it, even though she'd already played the role in New York and Los Angeles and London. She went on, did a screen test, just like you do in the old days. So they put her on film doing the role that she'd already done very well on stage to show the producer that she could do it. And essentially, she had to re-win the part. And they decided to cast other celebrities around her: Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, who was then a rising star, John Candy, a few others. So they built enough star power that the studio could feel satisfied. But Ellen Green got to do both the stage show in New York and the movie, which is not always the case.
Do you talk about the production that's going on now as well?
I do. I was fortunate to see the show in 2019. pre-pandemic, and I interviewed a number of people who worked on that production, including the director Michael Mayer and the original stars Jonathan Groff and Tammy Blanchard. And I got to see it, I think, a few more times since with some of the cast replacements. So that's kind of where the book ends, because I wanted to bring the story up to date. So the final chapter is about all the versions of Little Shop that have happened since the 1980s, from the beloved production in Pasadena to this revival, which is now entering, I think, its third year and selling through the rest of this year, at least in New York City at the West Side Theater, to other school productions or whatever other versions might appear. So I really wanted the story to continue right into the moment that the editor took it away from me and said no more words.
Yeah, they just announced a new cast for it yesterday.
Yeah, Lena Hall is going, I think she went in this week, and there'll be a bunch of great people in September. So even if you saw it again, it would be worth probably going back to see some of the cast replacements.
Oh yeah, Bryce Pinkham's going into it, and I love him.
He's great.
Who is your favorite cast member in Little Shop?
I mean, of all time in any cast?
Yes.
That's a hard question. I think I'll have to say Frank Luz, the original dentist, because when I was a child, his song "Dentist!" was my favorite song. And I won't say that I used to sing it constantly, but I love that song. And it was one of the special treats of this project that I got to meet the original dentist, Frank Luz, here in Manhattan, and sat down with him for 2 hours over drinks pre-pandemic and had a wonderful conversation and learned a lot. And he's a wonderful actor and also has the ability to imitate people. So as he told stories, he would make his voice sound like that of Ellen Greene or Howard Ashman or his co-star Lee Wilkoff, and Frank kind of embodied them. So sometimes I felt like I was in their presence as he told these stories. So I guess I have to give special praise to Frank Luz.
Now, this show has tons of background. Do you get into it all? The WP Theater and what was going on with the WP Theater and Ben Sprecher?
I don't mention Ben Sprecher by name, but the WPA Theater was the original producing organization behind Little Shop. And Howard Ashman and his partners were not the creators of that theater. There was an earlier cohort of people who first generated the theater in the very end of the 60s and into the 70s, and it was basically falling apart. And through a complicated mechanism, this theater, this not-for-profit theater with a pretty good reputation, was handed to Howard Ashman and his partner, Stuart White, and a few others, who then took it and ran with it starting around 1977. So there's a complicated backstory. But what's intriguing to me is just to see the relationships among off-Broadway and off-Broadway and Broadway. Because as you know, they're not really geographic places. They're more like different legal entities that have some overlap.
It's seats.
Yeah.
A lot of it is
seats, seat count, and whatever equity actors' equity will permit. So Little Shop of Horrors began as an off-Broadway show. That's a technical term for something with, at the time, 98 seats. It might be 99 now. And then it moved to an off-Broadway theater. That was the Orpheum on 2nd Avenue, where it had a successful run for 5.5 years. And in Ashman's view, it was never going to be a Broadway show. That's not what he wanted. But in 2003, after Ashman's death, there was a Broadway production done of Little Shop, directed by Jerry Zaks, and that lasted for about a year. So Little Shop is interesting because it existed in all three realms, off-Broadway at the old WPA Theater, off-Broadway with the Orpheum, and then later as a Broadway show.
Do you talk about, it took a while for this show to become a hit. It wasn't a hit originally.
It took months. I don't know if that, I mean, there was certainly some impatience in the summer of 1982 when it looked like maybe it wasn't going to work. And David Geffen, one of the producers, was panicking a bit, thinking, we're not selling enough tickets, this is not clicking. And Albert Poland, who was the general manager, said you have to wait, especially back then. Theater was still kind of a seasonal business, and they're just in, the show opened in July. Nowadays, I think you could open something in July. Hairspray actually kind of crossed that threshold and showed you could open something in the summer and work. Back in the day, things always kind of opened during that school year, fall to spring, effectively the Tony Awards season. So Little Shop opened in July, was not selling straight away. It wasn't really until October that I think they had to sell out. And it was like, okay, this thing is now going to settle in and be a nice long run.
What's the biggest secret in the book?
The biggest secret, I guess the biggest secrets be the ones that I never could resolve.
Mhm.
What do you, the there's one puzzle. If somebody could resolve it, let me know. There's two significant dates that compete in the show, the stage show, which you can see right now in New York. It opens with the words on the 21st day of the month of September, blah, 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 blah. Here's what happened. In the movie version from 1986, it says on the 23rd day of the month of September. So they shifted it by 2 days, and no one can explain why this happened. The
Maybe
only
it was
thing
better lyrically.
but this is just spoken, so it's not the same musical or lyric choice. The only thing I could come up with in the 70s, there was a song about the 21st of September. I think Earth, Wind, and
Yeah,
Fire
yeah.
did this song. So maybe someone pointed out and said, is that a reference to Earth, Wind, and Fire? But this is just my guesswork. I can't explain it. So that's the biggest mystery. Maybe that's not what you wanted. But it's so secret that even I couldn't find the answer.
What was the thing you learned the most by writing this book?
It's about human relationships. It's a work of art, it's a piece of writing, it's a piece of music, but it still comes down to those personalities. And on the cover page, I call it a cultural history, but I like to say it's also a social history because it's a story of relationships and tempers and egos and things like that. And Ashman, as director, I think was very masterful at handling the different competing egos. Here he's got a few weeks to put on a rather complicated off-Broadway show with $25,000, which is not a lot of money even then, certainly not for an ambitious piece with 8 or 9 cast members, 4 mechanical plants, and various other technical parameters. So the ability to harness the talent to get people to do their best and to get through that process and keep intact the vision of what you had is really remarkable.
What is your background? How did you end up writing this book? What did you do before?
Well, my training is in English literature. I have a PhD in English, but don't hold it against me. I am a lifelong lover of theater, grew up on Broadway shows and musicals, audio tapes, as I said, later compact disc and other versions of cast albums. I've written for the theater and I've written 2 other books. This is my 3rd. The first, that's the theatrical topic, but it comes from something that I've always loved, and it comes from a place of love. I've just wanted to do this for a long time. I've loved Little Shop.
What were the other 2 books?
Oh, the other 2 books are different topics. The first is about animation, a cartoon studio from the 1950s, and the second is about Victorian authors and people who plagiarized from the famous. So I can't really picture any reader who would line up all 3 and read them one after the next because they're kind of distinct. But this one is probably the most aimed at a wider audience. I think more people could pick up Attack of the Monster musical and read it and enjoy it, and I hope they do.
I have to ask is what's next on your list? Because these are eclectic. They're not like even in the same genres.
No, I mean they're nonfiction. That's the genre. But apart from that, they don't share much in common. Well, now I'm promoting the book. I'm getting the word out there, spreading the good news.
What's the next book, though?
I have a few vague ideas. It's too early to say. I want to sort of give this a proper birth. Today is actually its publication day, so I'm not
Happy
focused.
birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Attack of the Monster musical. It is now a few hours old, so I don't have a totally clear picture, but I'll let you know.
Where can we get the book?
You can get it from Bloomsbury.com. You can get it from Amazon.com. You can get it from Barnes & Noble, BN.com. In Theory Drama Bookshop in Manhattan has ordered copies. I don't know if it's on the shelf there, but it should be. They told me they have a bunch of copies. So if anyone is in Manhattan, go over to Drama Bookshop and check it out. I will also be there in person to do a book event and book signing. I think it's Monday, the 3rd of October. It's free, but you need to make reservations. So anybody in New York wants to learn more about Little Shop, that would be a good opportunity.
Will they be being sold at the theater?
I'm working on that right now. I think it's yes. One of the producers asked me about it. I said, yeah, that's a good idea. There's a little shop where the bar is in the lobby. There's not a lot of space, but why can't they sell the book alongside magnets and pencils and shirts? So we're working on that. I hope to have it there in a couple of weeks.
And when is Little Shop's 40th birthday?
Well, Little Shop has a couple birthdays. The original birthday is May 6th. So that was the very first public performance at the old WPA Theater on Fifth Avenue. So that could be the birthday. The official off-Broadway opening is July 27th. That was when it opened at the Orpheum. There was no previews, it was just kind of open. So July 27th is the official opening night at the Orpheum. But September 21st is also a birthday of sorts, because that's when the events of the story take place. I believe I'm going to do an event on the 21st of September at the West Side Theater. So I'll let you know more when that comes together.
Well, I think this is exciting. I love books with theater history and theater know-how. I look forward to reading this book, actually.
All right, good. Well, thank you, Susanna.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us.